In a forest outside the small town of Bastan in Spain, there's the dead body of a young girl. Among the trees, a shadow watches from afar. Soon the police arrive with Inspector Amaya and begin looking for clues. The girl disappeared last night after losing her bus, and her shoes have been left next to the road. The body shows she's been strangled with a rope, all her makeup was washed up, there are various animal hairs mixed with hers, and there's a traditional sweat covering her groin, which has been shaved. There are no signs of abuse, but the position of her hands isn't natural. Nearby they find her bag with an ID, her name was Ainoa and she was only 13. All this sounds familiar to Amaya, so she goes to prison to interrogate the boyfriend of Carla, who was killed a month and a half ago. The guy explains that Carla liked it rough and that he never wanted to leave her alone on the road, but it was her who refused to ride with him that night. Crying, he swears he didn't do it, and Amaya believes him. Later at the police station, the test results come back and confirm Amaya's theory. Carla and Ainoa were killed by the same rope, so they're facing a serial killer. Since Amaya used to work for the FBI, she's assigned to lead the case. This means she'll have to stay in Bastan, which happens to be her hometown. When she arrives at Bastan, she immediately goes to the police station to meet the local cops and continue making the comparison between Carla and Ainoa. Both girls had a sweat on their groins and animal hair mixed with theirs. Afterward Amaya goes to stay at her childhood home with her aunt Gracie and her sister Rosaura. Being here again brings back memories of her childhood and how her mother Rosario used to ignore her or push her away. The next day Amaya and Officer Jonan go to Ainoa's funeral and see someone suspiciously sneaking around. They chase after the man and discover it's Rosaura's husband Freddy. He claims he ran because Amaya's presence makes him nervous since he and Rosaura had a fight and that's why she's been staying at her aunt's. They're suddenly interrupted by Victor, the ex-husband of Amaya's other sister Flora. Although they're separated, he still occasionally talks to her. Later Amaya goes to see Flora, who has taken over the family's commercial bakery and has always resented her sister. When Amaya reveals the sweet from the crime scene, Flora tastes it and determines that it was made with fresh top-quality ingredients in a wood-fired oven. Only a few shops make such great quality, so Flora will have a list ready for the next day. Then Amaya returns to town and suddenly hears a mother screaming in the streets, searching for her daughter and who has missed school. Amaya calls the station and they lead a search through the forest with all the neighbors. While looking around, the cops joke about the animal hair on the bodies, saying the killer could have been the creature known as Beza John. At that moment someone yells about a discovery, but it's just a pair of shoes. After she orders the officers to reinforce the search, Amaya goes home and is surprised to find her boyfriend James, who has come to show his support. He's heard people on the news blaming everything on Beza John and since he's American, he doesn't know what that is. Rosaura explains is a tall hairy humanoid creature similar in appearance to Bigfoot, but she's offended that people accuse him of killing because the Beza John is the protector of the forest. When they go to bed, James asks Amaya why, as a kid, she lived there with her aunt instead of with her family. Amaya avoids the question but another painful memory comes to her mind. One day Rosario started to cut her hair rather carelessly, and she was so forceful that the scissors made Amaya bleed. All these memories make it hard for Amaya to sleep, so she goes to the window to watch the rain and is shocked to see Anne standing on the bridge. Amaya immediately runs outside, but when she reaches the bridge the girl is already gone. She quickly calls patrols to search the town to no avail. The next day Amaya has breakfast with Jonan to discuss the next few things they'll have to research for clues. When they're about to leave, they're shocked to see Flora with Detective Montes, who nobody has seen at the station in days. Meanwhile a man on a bike finds another pair of shoes by the road. Soon the police surround the area and find Anne's body in exactly the same condition as the last girl, sweat included. The doctor believes she's been dead for around 24 hours, meaning it couldn't have been her outside Amaya's window. Suddenly Montes shouts because he's seen something moving in the woods and he fires his gun, but only to hurt a pregnant Coipo otter. Montes swears he saw a humanoid shape, and since his bullet hurt the babies, Amaya shoots the poor mother for mercy. Later Jonas and Amaya go to talk to Anne's parents. Amaya checks the girl's room and finds the red coat she saw her in the other night with a pocket full of walnuts. Then she checks Anne's computer and discovers a folder with lots of suggestive pictures, even though the parents said she didn't have a boyfriend. Afterward Amaya oversees the autopsy, confirming this girl had the hands in the same position and her makeup was removed. She thinks the killer has a ritual to purify the girls and compares the hand position to an image of the Virgin Mary, pointing out that all the girls were also found by the river which could equal washing away their sins. In the afternoon, Jonan and Amaya go to Anne's school to talk to her friends. A girl says and put up an image of an innocent gal to trick people, but actually she had been seeing a married man in secret. When Amaya returns home, she accidentally drops one of the walnuts, and Ingrassi explains walnuts symbolize the power of witches. Then Amaya goes to her room and finds a key pendant that triggers another memory. After the horrible haircut, her mother had also made her wear ugly clothes and Amaya felt awful. To make her feel better, her dad gave her some money. Amaya was worried her mother would take the money from her, so her dad also gave her an employee key for Amaya to hide the money in the family bakery. In the evening, Rosario went to Amaya's room just to taunt her and left a walnut on her bedside table. In the present, suddenly Amaya wakes up and realizes she visited the bakery without even thinking about it. She immediately rushes home and throws the key away. The next day, Amaya and Jonan speak with a former commissioner, who remembers the case of a foreign girl who was found dead with candy on her legs. The girl's name had been Teresa, and she had also been strangled and left near the river. Teresa's hair had been perfect even though she had been dragged through the forest, and a few months later they found another girl with perfect hair by the river too. More girls with perfect hair kept showing up in different areas and the man offers a map, but he admits they never found any clues or suspects. Afterward Amaya goes to the bakery and sees Flora arguing with Victor. When Amaya goes inside, Flora gives her the list she prepared, but Amaya also asks for a sample of flour. Then Amaya leaves and finds Victor outside, but their chat is interrupted when she gets a shocking call. Amaya rushes to Freddy's house but he won't answer the door, so she checks the window, only to discover he's tried to self-delete. A desperate Amaya breaks down the door and runs to cut the rope to save him, and once he's safe on the floor, Amaya finds a note in his injured hand that says, "I love you Anne, I will love you forever." Later at the hospital, a doctor confirms it was a self-deletion attempt and the wound on Freddy's hand wasn't defensive. Amaya shows Rosaura the note and Rosaura explains she had known Freddy was cheating on her, but not with whom. She thinks that Freddy is lazy and useless, but not a murderer. Since Freddy can't talk, Amaya goes to see a friend of his, who ignores her until he hears that Freddy could be a suspect. The friend confirms he was with Freddy the night of the murder because he took him to a bar. Freddy had been behaving very weirdly and kept calling a woman who ignored him, and Freddy became so angry that he punched a mirror and hurt his hand, so they went to the hospital for stitches. The next day Amaya goes to Anne's funeral and she's shocked to see Flora there. Amaya is suddenly taken away by a police officer because another dead girl has been found, although this time the body is in an abandoned house in the woods. Her name was Johanna, she was 15, and she ran from home often, so the mother hadn't reported her disappearance. The doctor thinks she's been dead for about a week. The body is missing an arm, her face is full of bruises, and an injury on her neck indicates she was strangled by hand. There's no sweat on her groin and she was abused, so they think someone saw the news and is making a bad copy of it to blame the crime on the serial killer. At that moment Amaya looks out the window and sees a shadow moving among the trees, so she runs outside, but finds nothing. When they return to the station, Johanna's mother shows up to tell them her daughter was killed by her husband Jason. Joanna is the child from a previous marriage, and when she married Jason, at first he was a good stepfather. But when Joanna grew up, he started seeing her with new eyes and he became obsessed to the point he put a tracker in her phone. The day Joanna disappeared, Jason told his wife that he had taken the tracker out, which couldn't be a coincidence. While the officers go looking for that man, Amaya meets with Jonan, who has the results of his research. He's found 7 more cases with similar characteristics, but none of them had arrests. Back then nobody suspected they could have been done by the same person because there were a few differences, but Amaya and Jonan can tell this is someone who has been testing a ritual until he found the perfect combination. The first case had been Teresa, the body with the candies from 14 years ago. During those years, the killer had been more violent, and Jonan thinks he was trying to punish the girls who were into debauchery as a service to society. However, after a bunch of deaths, there was a 7-year period with no victims. His return wasn't Carla but a girl last year that everyone had thought fell off a cliff. Her hair had been perfectly combed and the hand position matched Virgin Mary's. Amaya and Jonan conclude that the killer is making a show out of the deaths because he wants his message to reach all the locals. Since the girls from a decade ago were from different towns, Amaya wants Jonan to check the newspapers from the days of their murders to see what linked all those towns because she doesn't think the killer chose the destinations at random. That night, Amaya allows Ingrassi to do a tarot reading for her. The cards say that the killer is nearby and that he's coming after Amaya and her family. When Amaya asks for his identity, the card of the devil comes out and Ingrassi cries out in fear. Meanwhile by the road, a girl misses the last bus, but soon a van appears and takes her away. It even drives past a police car, which doesn't notice anything. The next day, Joanna's stepfather Jason is found unconscious on a trail. Amaya goes to interrogate him and he immediately admits he beat up and abused Joanna before killing her. To try to hide his crime, he tried to make it look like what he had seen on the news. However, Jason denies having cut the girl's arm and says someone moved him to the trail last night because when he fell asleep he had been in the forest. He even has a blurry memory of someone carrying him. Before Amaya leaves, a ranger tells her that he heard a whistle in the woods and when he tried to follow it, he saw a humanoid shadow taking a bag into a cave. He tried to approach the person for an interrogation, but when the ranger got close enough, the person had already disappeared. Moments later, Amaya arrives home to discover they're having a family dinner. An argument is already going on because Flora thinks dying doesn't make those girls saints and she disapproves of their debauchery, but when Amaya starts to argue back, Ingrassi tells everyone to drop the subject. However, Flora keeps complaining, mentioning how Amaya left the town instead of helping her sisters take care of their sick mother. She regrets having sent Rosario to a clinic and James is shocked to hear this because Amaya had told him her mother was dead. When Amaya says in her mind Rosario is indeed dead, Flora insults her and leaves with Victor. At that moment Amaya gets a call from the station and rushes there to learn that none of the flower samples match the sweets from the crime scenes. There's only one sample left that they haven't analyzed yet because it came later, and Amaya worries because it's the one belonging to Rosaura. Suddenly she and Jonan see Montes enter the station, which is weird because today's his day off. They check the security cameras and discover he's grabbing some reports before heading out. The duo follows Montes to a cafe where he meets Flora and gives her the reports, so they immediately rush inside to point out this is stealing evidence. Flora refuses to say anything, so Jonan arrests her. When they return to the station, Amaya grabs the latest report and reveals that Flora gave them a different flower from the one that she actually uses. She knows this because Rosaura uses the same flower, yet the test results are different. Rosaura's flower matches the crime sweets, so Flora cracks and admits she changed the flower to protect her business. Many of her employees take flour home and she didn't want to get involved. An argument ensues, only to be interrupted by Amaya's boss, who calls her to his office. The boss has discovered that Freddie had a relationship with Anne and learned about Flora's flower trick which Amaya had been hiding from the other cops. He decides this is a conflict of interest and takes Amaya out of the case, giving it to Montes instead. Amaya tries to tell him that Montes and Flora are working together, but the boss believes Montes' story that he had only been interrogating Flora as a suspect. On her way out, Amaya sees everyone running to find another girl who just disappeared. Moments later Amaya gets a call from her mentor in the FBI, who reminds her to go back to her origins to remove the trauma that blocks her vision. Amaya goes to the bakery and remembers the night that she used her father's key to hide the money. Suddenly Rosario arrived, so Amaya tried hiding under the furniture. Her mom found her anyway, and when she saw the money and the key, she accused her of stealing from her own family. Amaya tried running away, but Rosario grabbed her and slapped her multiple times. When Amaya managed to push her away, Rosario went crazy and grabbed a rolling pin to hit her with it. Later Rosario went home in a dazed state, and when her husband saw the key, he desperately rushed to the bakery. To his shock, he found an unconscious Amaya buried in the flour cask. The father immediately saved her and took her to the hospital, where the doctor explained the flour created a scab that saved her from bleeding out. He also mentioned that Rosario kept on hitting Amaya after she fainted. Once Amaya was discharged, her father sent her to live with Ingrassi. Back in the present, Amaya decides to go see her mother at the clinic. She finds her tied to the bed and asks her if she has anything to do with the murders, but Rosario insults her and tries to attack her, so an upset Amaya leaves. On her way out, a doctor explains they had to tie Rosario because she attacked a nurse and ate the flesh she tore off while repeating Amaya's name. The doctor then reveals her brother-in-law comes to see Rosario very often and even brings her flowers. Meanwhile Jonan is researching the old newspapers and finds Flora in a picture. Then he keeps looking and sees Victor appearing in a bunch of motorcycle conventions. He's the brother-in-law the doctor meant, not Freddie. Amaya calls him with the same conclusion, so she tells him to inform the others while she goes after Victor. Unfortunately Montes doesn't get the call because he's exploring the cave the ranger saw and he has no signal. Back to Amaya, she's speeding under the rain and finds the road blocked, so when she tries to hit the brakes, the car skids and rolls down the hill, landing upside down. At the same time Jonan arrives at Victor's house, only to find it empty. He tries calling Amaya to tell her, but she's unconscious inside the car. In the meantime, Montes and his men go deep into the cave and they find numerous remains of human bones, including children's and a severed woman's arm. Somewhere else, Victor starts brushing his latest victim's hair to get her ready for the ritual. Moments later, Amaya wakes up when she hears a loud whistle. Somehow she's out of the car, and when she turns around, she sees the Beza John in the fog. By following him, she gets out of the forest and reaches a mysterious house. With her gun out, Amaya goes inside and hears a song her parents loved, noticing the oven on with a sweet inside. She also hears a girl screaming, so she starts searching the house and eventually comes across a collection of newspaper clippings talking about all the murders and pictures of the girls. Suddenly Amaya is attacked by Victor, who hurts her arm with a rolling pin. When she asks him about the girl, Victor begins ranting about how girls nowadays are all tarts that like playing with men, so he had to teach them the purity that Flora and Rosario preached. As soon as he gets distracted, Amaya grabs some scissors and stabs his leg before running out, kicking Victor away when he tries to stop her. When Amaya reaches the stairs, Victor catches up to her and hits her with the rolling pin again. Amaya defends herself and a fight ensues, during which Victor tries to strangle her. Amaya struggles and manages to push the scissor further into his leg before pushing him away. Then Amaya runs to finally find the girl and starts to untie her as Victor comes closer, but before he can attack, he's shot twice by Flora. Sometime later at the station, Amain explains the whole case. Victor killed his first victim 14 years ago because he considered Teresa's foreign lifestyle a threat to the traditional town. Afterward the guilt made him an alcoholic, which helped him convince himself he was helping society. The next 6 years he killed 8 more girls, but then he met Flora, who kept his anger down. During their 7 years of marriage, he didn't kill anyone, but after their divorce Victor's anger came back out and he started killing again, staging everything with specific details to get his message known and regain his wife's respect. Then Montes adds that some of the bones in the cave were from Victor's victims, but other bones seem to be from unrelated crimes. The amputated arm was indeed Joanna's, but it wasn't cut by her stepfather or Victor. A few weeks later, Flora publishes a book about the family business and calls her mother the true guardian of the town's purity. Meanwhile, Amaya and James inform Rosaura and Ingrassi that they're having a baby. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.